All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Every 3 years, the English Premier League sells its television rights. For the current cycle, we're talking about a deal worth well over £3 billion. Now, here's the craziest part. Even the bottom, relegated club in England earns more in TV money than most of the top clubs in Spain's La Liga, Germany's Bundesliga, or Italy's Serie A. That one single fact explains exactly why Premier League clubs can just casually outspend everyone else on transfers, completely warping the global football market. Today, we're going to break down exactly how all that money is divided.
To really understand the sheer scale of this operation, you have to wrap your head around this number, £3.3 billion. And remember, that is collected annually purely for the television rights. To put that into perspective, that is literally more than the GDP of some small nations, entirely generated by 20 football clubs playing a game over a 9-month season. But it isn't just the sheer size of the pie that makes the Premier League such a dominant global monopoly. It's the highly specific way they agree to cut it.
Because, honestly, the whole system sets up the ultimate contradiction in modern sports. Take last season. Southampton finished dead last. They had an absolutely miserable campaign, getting relegated with the 4th worst points total in the history of the Premier League. They won 2 games all year. 2. Yet they still walked away with a staggering £109 million in central payments. That's more television money than 17 of the 20 clubs in Spain's La Liga earned that exact same season. So you have Southampton in last place out-earning massive European giants like Sevilla, Villarreal, and Atletico Madrid. Their market size just didn't matter. The massive check still cleared.
So you're probably wondering, how is that even possible? How does a relegated, struggling club outbid Champions League regulars? Well, at minute 6, we cover the one clause smaller clubs fought for in 1992 that still shapes the entire financial structure of the Premier League today. It is honestly one of the most important documents in modern sports history. But before we get to that, we need to trace this massive pile of money right back to the beginning.
Let's rewind for a second and look at how this all grew from a pretty bleak 1980s landscape into an absolute financial juggernaut. Back in the 80s, English football was, commercially speaking, a disaster. The stadiums were crumbling, and the TV deal for the entire sport was basically pocket change. Then, in 1992, the top clubs broke away to form the Premier League. A new satellite broadcaster called Sky swooped in and paid roughly £304 million over 5 seasons, with that original domestic BSKB deal making up about $191 million of it. At the time, people thought they had vastly overpaid. But fast forward to the upcoming 2025 to 2029 cycle, and the total value across all rights is £13.2 billion. That is an explosive 30-fold increase. Literally no other sports property on Earth has grown quite like that, except maybe the NFL. The secret sauce early on was that broadcasters used exclusive football rights to essentially force viewers to buy their hardware. Rupert Murdoch actually had this famous quote where he called sport a battering ram for his pay TV business. Think about it. If you wanted to watch your team play every week, you literally had to bolt a satellite dish to the side of your house. Football sold the satellite dishes, and then the subscriptions from those dishes funded the football. It created this relentless, brilliant feedback loop where the broadcast numbers just kept going up and up, driven entirely by the absolute loyalty of the fans. Okay, so fast forward to today. How is this incredible £13.2 billion pie actually sliced up? Well, every single pound the Premier League earns from television goes into a giant central pot. From there, it pours out to the 20 clubs through 3 very specific distribution buckets. Understanding these 3 buckets, the equal share, merit payments, and facility fees, is absolutely crucial to understanding the entire football ecosystem. Bucket number 1 is the equal share, and this is really the bedrock of the entire league. Roughly half of the domestic deal, and the overwhelming majority of the international deal, is divided 20 ways, perfectly identically. For the 2024 to 2025 season, this bucket guaranteed every single club nearly £97 million before a single ball was even kicked. Seriously, it doesn't matter if you're the reigning champion or a newly promoted side from a tiny town with a tiny stadium, you get this exact same base amount. No questions asked. Then you have Bucket 2, which is merit payments. This one rewards performance, based purely on your final league position. It operates like a straight financial ladder. Each rung you climb up that table represents roughly a £2.6 million gap. The bottom club gets one single share, worth $2.6 million, while the champion gets 20 shares, and that creates a massive gap. Teams like Arsenal and Manchester City routinely take home over £50 million just from this bucket, while relegated clubs take a tiny fraction of that. This is exactly why you see those mid-table teams fighting to the absolute death on the final day of the season just to finish 12th instead of 13th. That one spot is worth millions. Finally, bucket 3 is facility fees. Basically, this rewards being watchable on TV. You get paid every single time broadcasters pick your match to be shown live. Naturally, this leads to wildly different outcomes based almost purely on a club's popularity and the size of their fan base. For example, Liverpool were selected 30 times and earned nearly £25 million from this bucket. Ipswich Town, they were selected just 10 times, earning roughly $9 million. It's the exact same set of rules, but a very different financial outcome dictated entirely by television audiences and global appeal.
But here's what surprises people, and this completely shifts the paradigm we're looking at. Everything we just talked about kind of assumes that British subscribers paying for Sky or TNT Sports are the ones driving this financial machine. But they aren't. Not anymore. The domestic deal isn't the big one anymore. We have officially crossed a major tipping point in sports broadcasting.
The international rights, meaning selling Premier League football to people who might have never even set foot in England across more than 180 different territories, are now the single largest line on the spreadsheet. The 2025 to 2029 international package alone is worth a staggering £6.5 billion. And honestly, this overseas explosion raises some very uncomfortable questions in those club boardrooms. Because if the majority of the money is now coming from abroad, shouldn't the historically massive clubs that those international fans actually tune in to watch get a much bigger cut? Just look at where this global money is pouring in from. The United States alone, through NBC Sports, writes a check for £378 million a season. That is for a country where soccer is arguably the fourth or maybe fifth most popular sport. An early morning, 7:30 a.m. kickoff on a Saturday in Seattle, where fans are literally drinking pints with their breakfast, is now more commercially lucrative than most European leagues are in their entirety. Then you have Asia, where the Premier League has built a massive cultural advantage over 30 years of primetime evening kickoffs. And of course, the Middle East, where broadcast rights deeply tie into massive sovereign wealth strategies. The contrast here is just mind-blowing. The Premier League's overseas money alone, which comes out to about £1.6 billion per season, completely dwarfs Spain's entire domestic and international television income combined. Let that sink in. That is the gap. That right there is the entire story of modern European football. And almost every single penny of that massive international wealth is split equally among the 20 English clubs.
Which brings us right to the promised reveal, the origin story of the equal share clause, how it was negotiated, and why it's the Premier League's secret weapon for competitiveness. Back when the league was formed in 1992, giants like Manchester United and Arsenal really wanted to keep the TV money in proportion to their size. They argued, quite logically, that their global brands were what actually sold the product. But the smaller clubs fought back hard. They argued that a league isn't 20 independent businesses, it's a single product that requires 20 participants. Manchester United simply cannot broadcast a match against an empty pitch. Well, the smaller clubs won that fight, ensuring that the base money is shared equally. And crucially, they wrote into the rules that it requires an impossible 14 out of 20 votes to ever change this. So the biggest clubs simply do not have the numbers to overthrow the system.
Because of this brilliant 1992 clause, and a strict ceiling cap that prevents the top club from earning more than 1.8 times the bottom club's central payments, the earnings gap in England is incredibly tight. In the Premier League, the ratio between the champion and the last-place team is just 1.6 to 1. Now look at Spain's La Liga. The biggest clubs, like Real Madrid and Barcelona, take the absolute lion's share, earning 4 times what the smallest clubs make. Same sport, completely different economic reality. And it's exactly why a bottom-half English team can just casually afford to buy a top player from Spain.
When you compare the English model to the rest of Europe, the structural differences are staggering. Spain has historically operated essentially as a popularity tax, where the top two devoured well over 40% of the league's TV revenue combined, just leaving scraps for everyone else. Italy's Serie A is dealing with a shrinking domestic pot and aging stadiums. Germany's Bundesliga is actually the most equal of the bunch, but their 50+1 rule strictly caps outside investments. This is great for preserving fan ownership, but it means they just can't generate those English-level broadcast fees, which allows Bayern Munich to just dominate year after year.
So here is the really uncomfortable conclusion for the rest of Europe's elite. The Premier League isn't dominant globally because its top teams are the richest. Honestly, at the very peak, clubs like Real Madrid and Bayern Munich still generate incredible, world-beating revenue. No, the Premier League is dominant because its 14th best club is richer than almost everyone else's second best club. Depth, not peak. That is exactly what the equal share clause bought them back in 1992. It created a relentlessly competitive middle class.
So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to debate. Should the Premier League change to a merit-based system like La Liga, or is equal sharing the right model? Is subsidizing those smaller clubs the absolute secret to competitive chaos, ensuring that anyone can truly beat anyone on a given weekend? Or is it an unfair tax on the biggest teams who generate all those massive global audiences but are forced to subsidize clubs that might get relegated in 9 months? Think about it next time you sit down to watch a match. Catch you in the next explainer.